Being here. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive People Club. I was just pinning a link here that I will be referencing today and actually reading part of it out loud to the group to give you reference on this term called sensitive striver. This is the first time I came across this, and I've been doing a lot of research about highly sensitive people for over the last year, really intensely, and it was really interesting to come across this term that I had not heard before. And oddly enough, it wasn't even in a publication that was directed specifically to highly sensitive people, like the Highly Sensitive Refuge or those spaces that are geared towards HSPs and empaths. But it was in Forbes. So I thought that was really interesting. And it got me thinking about this would be a really great topic to talk about in Clubhouse, as I consider myself highly self-motivated overachiever or high achiever, whichever you want to label yourself. And I am a very much a highly sensitive person and empath. So this arena is very familiar to my own experience. And I was really curious to see how other HSPs relate and connect to this term, or if they'd heard it before, or if you really had that perspective of yourself from this lens, from this article. So I just wanted to say hello. Thanks for everyone for being in the room today. I am actually going to take the time to read the article. It literally is a short article. It's about 5 minutes. And then you'll have context of this term and what we want to talk about today. So I'm just going to read this article, which I have pinned here on the top. It's 18 signs you're a sensitive high achiever. And then we'll define what a sensitive striver is. And then I would love anyone who's interested and available to come up on stage and share anything that is resonating with you from the article, if you relate to it, if you recognize yourself in these labels and descriptions of what a sensitive striver is, and or if you have any questions, or you're just learning about being a highly sensitive person and maybe this is all brand new to you, you are welcome to come up to the stage and ask any questions or share your experience. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this. It's funny, in the article, my name is Julie, obviously, and the article's character is named Juliet. So it says, Juliet was the type of employee every manager dreamed of. Hardworking and dedicated, Juliet was poised to become a VP of product at a technology company. And like a lot of people, she was a go-getter. Juliet loved her job and took pride in being the go-to person on the team. She was always taught she should go above and beyond, and that's exactly what she did. Recently, though, Juliet had taken on a big new project. This meant more responsibility, and she was excited about the prospect of leveling up in her career. But this new project also meant massively more stress for Juliet. She was dedicated to doing every task perfectly, made sure everyone felt heard, that everyone's needs were met, often to her own detriment. Juliet struggled to say no, and even made decisions on behalf of her boss, who was a bit of an absentee manager. As Juliet said yes to each new request, inside she saw it not as a request, but a demand. In her head, Juliet told herself things like, I must please my boss. I must execute this project perfectly. I must do everything, or I'm admitting I'm a fraud. No one can know how insecure I am. Do you know anyone like Juliet? Are you someone like Juliet? Because Juliet is what I call a sensitive striver. Sensitive strivers are high achievers who think and feel everything more deeply than most people. Biologically speaking, I am talking about the 15 to 20% of people who pick up on more stimuli within and around them. They are highly attuned to emotions, their own and those of others. Sensitive strivers are deeply caring and give 100% to their work, all with an inner world on overdrive. And because they process information more deeply than other people, they're more susceptible to stress, emotional overwhelm, and overthinking. This combination of sensitivity and ambition can be tricky for people like Juliet, and it makes common workplace situations like getting feedback and trusting your judgment even more challenging. The good news is that sensitivity combined with a strong drive to achieve can also make you a powerhouse performer. The research proves it. Managers consistently rate people with higher sensitivity as their top contributors. So I'll pause there really quickly so I can take a drink of water. The next section of this article dives into the question, are you a sensitive striver? So it lists 18 points. I'll read through those. As former Gold Star students, sensitive strivers love a fun quiz. To find out if you fit the profile, check off the signs that you can relate to. 1, you experience emotions to an unusual level of depth and complexity. 2, you have a strong desire to exceed expectations in every aspect of your life. 3, you consider yourself to be driven and ambitious. 4, you crave meaning and fulfillment. 5, you need time to think through decisions before you act. 6, you have an inner critic that never takes a day off. 7, you are kind, compassionate, and genuinely empathetic to others. 8, you have a keen ability to sense other people's feelings. 9, you often put other people's needs ahead of your own. 10, you find it difficult to set boundaries and often say yes too much. 11, you have struggled with burnout in the past. 12, you are easily impacted by stress. 13, you struggle to turn off your mind because it's constantly filled with thoughts. 14, you feel anxious when you're caught off guard or you know you're being watched. 15, you hold yourself to high standards. 16, you try to get things right and judge yourself harshly if you make mistakes. 17, you often get stuck in indecision and analysis paralysis. 18, you fear feedback and take criticism to heart. If you relate to 9 or more of these statements above, you can confidently call yourself a sensitive striver. Once you better understand how your built-in temperament shape the way you see yourself and approach your career, you can channel your qualities as strengths and not self-sabotage. Instead of feeling ordered around by your insecurities, worries, or your own unrealistic high expectations of yourself, you can feel in control of your own life and reclaim what success means to you. So that is the end of the article, and I wanted to share it verbatim because it was short and sweet, and it also just hits on so many great points that I just wouldn't have been able to condense down while holding space for this room. So I would love if anyone is probably still processing everything that I just shared. It was a lot. And that's why I have the article here as a link. So if you want to visually see the article, you can also click on the link and check it out that way. But if you relate to this experience, if this is familiar to you, if any of these points really resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know if you consider yourself a sensitive striver, if this is something you're just hearing about for the first time, or if you've always known you're a high achiever and you're just learning you're an HSP. How does our trait interconnect with this desire to be that high peak performer? So those are kind of my questions here for the audience. If anyone would like to share, you just click on the hand at the bottom of the screen, and that will let me know that you want to come up on the stage. And if you're not in a space to speak on stage, there is a chat feature you just hit the little talk bubble on the bottom left, and that will, let's see, I want to make sure this is enabled. It looks like it is. So you should be able to write in a question or anything you would like to share through that chat. So I just wanted to pause here for a minute and give anyone space here to hop up on stage or put a question in the chat. I'll just go ahead and mute myself. Hello, hello, welcome. Thank you for coming to the stage. What would you like to share?
Hi there. Well, I'll share that I'm 42 now, and in my mid to late 20s, I would have checked almost every single one of those criteria. I was definitely a sensitive striver. I had no idea at the time, but I remember feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and confused that I was the first one into my corporate job and the last one to leave, and it life didn't get easier. It just more piled up because I was raising my hand basically and saying I'm that person. So it took me breaking away from that, like literally reaching a breaking point where something had to change. And I left that really intense entertainment situation, and I'm now working for myself many years later, and I was like a 7.5. I'll say 8. So I didn't hit the mark, and I'm happy about that. I still do care deeply about doing a good job and feel connected to people. So I don't think everything on that list is a negative, but in excess definitely leads to burnout and isn't sustainable. So I guess I'm patting myself on the back a little bit and don't feel bad about that. I'm happy, really like thanking myself for making a change. And also maybe it's part of aging is naturally I've softened. I don't feel so ambitious at all. I'm much less motivated by that. Sometimes I feel like I could use a little extra fire, but I think I think this is better than the alternative or the other extremes. So here I am. Thank you for this room, Julie. I really, it's interesting to reflect back and to see how um, gaining an understanding, just simply knowing about my sensitivity helped me to make changes that have made my life a lot easier now. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. And you actually bring up a lot of great points. Age is a factor. I can definitely reflect and look back at my younger self. I lived in New York City from about age 25 to 31, and that was just hustle, hustle, hustle. My whole life was on overdrive, and I had no idea I was a highly sensitive person at that time. And when I left New York, that was in 2008, it was to enjoy a slower pace of life, to not be constantly overwhelmed by my environment and where I live and all of the energy that New York requires of you. And as I've gotten older, you take that journey and that experience, and you can see what's working and being self-reflective and self-aware on that journey. And then learning I was an HSP at age 43 um, really helped me make better boundaries and have more self-compassion for myself, the same kind of self-compassion I would give everyone else, but not myself. I turned that around after learning I was an HSP. But I think I was on that path of constant burnout, being a passionate person with so many interests, overwhelmed by my depth of processing and my ability to consume a large amount of information. And then having that eagle's eye view all of those data points, and then not understanding why others were not able to put those clues together as quickly as I was. And this was all prior to knowing I was an HSP, but knowing now that this depth of processing, not just from our external environment, but also our internal, is, you know, in the driver's seat of my high achieving desires and putting everyone else's needs above my own. So, and I can tell also through this couple years of experiencing the pandemic and going through a stage in our life, this global experience of just acknowledging, you know, life is short, it's unpredictable, it's not in our control, we don't know what's coming. And how do I want to live more intentionally? And definitely looking at my value system and also incorporating my trait into that value system has been huge and has just given me more peace and more comfort with change, and knowing that I want to do a lot, but also accepting that my pace may look a lot slower to others and outsiders who are not highly sensitive, and being okay with that, really just trusting that everything is guided to me in divine time, and having less of that masculine external control linear pursuit, and really stepping into the feminine energy of sitting back and being the royal advisors that we are. We're the thinkers, the processors. We're able to solve problems by slowing down and thinking about them instead of charging forward and putting ourselves in harm, whether it's mental, emotional, physical. Really taking care of myself as a highly sensitive person has given me more permission to pursue what I want to pursue, but in a more loving kindness way towards myself. So, age, I think, is, you know, you brought up, is a huge factor. And I think the older you get, the more you realize that we just don't have the stamina to keep up that pace. And it's just not healthy and it isn't in alignment with our trait. So, really reflecting on, you know, where you're at and what stage of life you're at. Obviously, someone else's stage of life might be raising small children, and that's a whole different thing. Or someone else's stage might be in retirement, or, you know, the early parts of their career. So, acknowledging those different stages as well is really important on this journey of being kind to yourself, but also being that person that's very ambitious, who wants to take charge of so many aspects of their life, but in, again, this kind, loving way. So, thanks for sharing your experience. And I mean, after hearing this list, I agree with you. I also see my younger self in this list, but knowing that I'm a highly sensitive person and that shift that happened in my 40s, it is a relief looking back at that list and saying that's really not me anymore. And, you know, loving that part of myself, loving that part of my experience because it brought me here. But also just being kinder to myself on this journey. So thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Um, and is there anyone else that would like to come up on stage and share your experience with being a high achiever, or an HSP, or if you have questions, or if this doesn't resonate with you at all and you don't relate to this? I think it's really important to understand, just because we're all HSPs, we don't we don't have all the same parts to ourselves and same experience. So everyone's experience is unique, even though we're under the umbrella of HSPs. So I'm always open to other people's perspectives and experiences, and I value um, other HSPs' insights and reflections on this topic. So I would love to hear from you if you're in a space to come up on stage. I'll go ahead and pause.
Can I say something while you're
Of
waiting? Is
course.
that okay? Okay. Um, I really, really love what you said. You put words to something for me that I hadn't really realized before, which is I think what you said was that you were like praised for your ability or noticed your like the skill that you had to connect all of these data points. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but I was definitely recognized for that just in different words and put into like sensitive and high intensity situations because of that. Like basically I could read the room and act right. And um not everybody has that ability. And I but because I wasn't aware that that's really what was happening or how to manage that, um I that's where the burnout came in. It was very my sense of achievement and success, I guess, was very external. It came from like outside praise or recognition and what's it called? I haven't been in corporate promotion. I like forgot what that word was. That's so funny. Um, and now I think a big shift is that sense of mm, I feel gratified and good about myself. It's more internal and based on how I feel and my surroundings, my relationships. But really, like I feel at the center of that now rather than something that's just kind of getting knocked around by others. So it's like a more grounded sense of self. So thanks for saying that thing about the data points, because I guess that really is what highly sensitive people are doing is just taking in a lot of disparate information. And I think with maturity and practice, that can be synthesized like in a more mature, sophisticated way. And I wasn't doing that. So it was sort of consuming me rather than something that I was able to like process and kind of have some agency over.
I love that. And yeah, I think that is a huge gift of being highly sensitive is our nervous system is designed to take in more information. And so we're going to take that information and process it longer, which allows us to see things that other people miss. And in that position, we're able to kind of have a bird's eye view and see things as a whole and how things are connected and how things are moving in connection with other parts. And so I think that's what makes us so valuable in the workplace, is just that reflection and that insight and how quickly we're able to process through that and take action based on that information. So I'll just give an example of different situations in my past, and just how often different employers may lean on that trait and not know that they're leaning on a highly sensitive person who is also processing so much inner reflection, whether those inner reflections are positive or negative, and your level of maturity of how to respond to those um, different stimuli that you're having internally. So whether you're having a trigger response or if you're feeling off that day because you didn't get sleep and so you're responding to that lack of sleep, it changes how we show up, and that creates a lot of pressure on ourselves. And this external view, whether it's an employer, a manager, or colleagues or coworkers, will start to see us one way, and maybe our internal stimuli will change how we show up that day, and then their expectation is we should have been behaving how we were before, but our internal stimuli is changing how we feel about being there and maybe in that environment or engaging with that type of work or with those types of energies at work. And so then we're almost being held to these expectations from our external world that we can't uphold because our inner stimuli is really taking us down or draining our energy or keeping our thoughts elsewhere and not being present. So that's something that's really been a part of my personal experience in the different jobs that I've had. And I'm right now self-employed, and that is extremely helpful as a highly sensitive person to be able to decide on my own schedule and pick the jobs that work for me and work for my trait that allow me to incorporate a lot of self-care, rest, downtime, proper sleep. And as someone who's been self-employed for a really long time, I've learned that there are ebbs and flows with the work that I do. So, for instance, right now I'll be wrapping up my substitute teaching, which is something I just started again in January. And it was very intense going back to this work, which is something I had done pre pandemic. And when the schools closed down, I didn't go back, hadn't gone back until this year. And the funny part is, I had a lot of resistance to that, having to engage to be back in those school systems. But ultimately, it was the greatest gift because it led me to a lot of the advocacy and education work that I want to do around youth and highly sensitive people who are teachers, administrators, students. And it actually helped me use my strength as a highly sensitive person. And I was able to be in a system and not be a part of the system and not have those pressures of the system, but really to stand on my own 2 feet and share with others this trait and use this opportunity to really put my purpose and my passion and my mission and my vision into that job instead of having the job rob me of time or feel drained by the job. So it's just a shift that I felt. But then once substitute teaching ends for me, I shift into my photographer role, which happens between mid May and October. So this is the time to get outside and do portraits, senior portraits, family portraits, headshots, also be doing studio work. And then as the winter months come in, I step back into a different role, whether that's substitute teaching or building this curriculum that I've been doing behind the scenes. But doing that work that is more at home or internal, so writing work. So it's just these shifts that I have even in this seasonal flow of the jobs that I hold, and really recognizing that um everything comes in due time, everything has its season, its run, and I don't have to hold on to things so tightly, and to recognize that being a highly sensitive person is who I am 100% of the time, and that's who I want to show up in these workspaces when I do act with the external world and different systems that are. As a freelancer, as a self-employed person, I feel like I'm an outsider, but I still have this grounded perspective of who I am and how I engage with these systems and institutions. And being grounded as a highly sensitive person all along the way to kind of show people and give people that experience of what a highly sensitive person is, what we value, and how we show up in our superpower. So I'm going off on a tangent here, but hopefully that makes sense to you. And you can recognize that being someone that is constantly looking at the needs of others and seeing that our needs still matter in that process is really important and a huge shift, and is something that if you're not there yet as a highly sensitive person where you can make your own schedule or be self-employed, you're taking steps towards having um, those opportunities that you can kind of create your schedule to be your own, and then also consider your values and your understanding of your trait and incorporate that into all that you do. I think is the ultimate goal, and especially around making work as a highly sensitive person. So I'm just curious if anyone wants to share their journey and their work as a highly sensitive person, if you recognize yourself in any of these statements that I brought up, um, setting boundaries, burnout, having a lot of stress at your job, and if you've made, decisions to get out of those kind of positions, or if you think you need to muscle through it, maybe you don't even know you're a highly sensitive person. Anyone that is on that journey, I would love to hear from you. I'll go ahead and mute myself for a minute.
I just really love hearing what you've been able to design for yourself. I'm really happy for you. I don't know if that sounds corny. I'm really, really happy for you. And just to hear before you even mentioned the seasons, I noticed that you were describing work that was um, like outward facing during, from May, like those warmer summer months, and then kind of pulling back a little bit to do a different kind of work that's more home based, or I don't know, maybe requires less or a different kind of energy during the darker, cooler months. And as somebody who's practicing getting more in tune with the cycles of nature, I I envy that a little bit, because unfortunately my photography schedule doesn't like line up very ideally with the seasons. I start kind of going when I would want to be slowing down in the fall. But I imagine that HSPs are more sensitive to seasonal changes, and that it's probably a good thing to be aware of. And yeah, I'm like equal parts happy, equal parts happy, equal parts envious that you have like landed in that nice rhythm where you have that natural energy around you is kind of working with you and supporting you the way that you're using your own energy.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Hyla. I really reflected on how this kind of came about, and it is very natural and very much aligned with the seasons of going in and then being out. And someone who is a deep feeler, someone who's very self-aware, and I've been at practice with trying to find my rhythm and a system that works for me in terms of work. And it's always been a struggle. I just want to say that out loud, because it's never an easy journey to be self-employed or to be your own boss, or to have to constantly do the next thing to get money in. It's a lot of stress, but I think as I've aged and I've gotten older, I just recognize I can put in what I can put in, and I can be okay with things being undone, and letting the season kind of dictate where I step into what role. And I mean, I don't know about anyone else in this room, but I can definitely say that when I try to work against the seasonal flow, I have a lot of resistance. And unfortunately, I wasn't expecting to go back to subbing as soon as January. I would have preferred to have been a little bit later in the year. And it was a lot of work for me to leave the house during the coldest months of Iowa winter. And what it did is it motivated me to reassess my season of photography to really build that up so that income takes me through the dead of winter so that I can spend time writing and working on other projects that are home based and more internal, because that's the season of winter. It's that time of going in, of hibernating, of being in the darkness, accepting that we're not going to have a lot of energy. It's not that natural rhythm to be out in the world like spring and summer call our energy out of the house. As soon as the sun is out and the temperatures raise, I am immediately wanting to be outside and connecting with nature, spending time outside, connecting with people. So it does just really shift my energy and how I connect with the world, and then how I connect with my inner world, and then honoring those seasons. And that feels the most aligned with my spirit and soul, so that I feel at peace and I feel that I am in a rhythm and a flow that is aligned with my energy. And I think that is really the key to being a deep feeler, to being a deep processor, is to give yourself that space and time to be who you are. And, I am 46 years old. And so, someone who's just starting out with a career or just trying to figure out life would be at a different stage. But I think the older I've gotten, and especially after 2 years of a pandemic, I am much more grounded in who I am. And I was fortunate enough to have all of 2021 dedicated to talking about this trait and being on Clubhouse every single week. And that was because I had um, stimulus checks and tax refunds and money that I had done a job and then was living off of those savings. And had I not had that full year to really dedicate, I would not have successfully integrated myself back into subbing. And I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of my position in the way that I have, because I spent all of this time and energy talking about this trait through 2021. It gave me the ability to speak up in a situation that I wouldn't normally speak up in. And to engage with people, I always talk about this trait. So I feel like I'm in a constant Clubhouse room just in the world, whether it's in the teacher's lounge or with a student or with the mental emotional support group that they have in schools now, which is just blowing my mind. It's just where I want to live. Um, and so being able to show up as myself, I was really in a season of growth all through 2021 that it gave me the ability to show up as I am in 2022 as this advocate, as this educator of this trait, and that person who wants to change the systems that I'm essentially a part of, so that more HSPs, whether they're teachers or students or staff, have the knowledge and the ability to learn the way that they need to learn, or give themselves the self-care that they need, or step into support for mental emotional support or healing trauma as an HSP. So it's just an exciting path. And I really appreciate your acknowledgement of that journey, because it has taken me a long time to get here. And especially with this pandemic and just what those 2 years have really done to us as a global population, and how this shift is happening. And I've been able to participate in that shift in a powerful way instead of running from it or resisting it or not even acknowledging it. So that is a gift. And I feel very grateful and humbled that I was given the opportunity, space, and time to really hone in on what it was that made me feel like I could have purpose and make a change and leave an impact. That has been the clarity of 2021 that got me into this seasonal acknowledgement of taking the work that I know and I love, and then making it work for me and creating it in seasons that go with nature and my natural rhythm and my innate biological trait is really just a blessing. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're my HSP hero. I'm gonna
Oh,
hop down
thank
to
you. That's
now.
so sweet. Appreciate that. And thanks for hanging on the stage for so long and hanging out with me and sharing your experience. I really appreciate it. I would love to invite anyone else that would like to come on stage, whether it's just an idea, a thought you want to reflect. I let's see. I do. I'm happy to go through some of these points because I realize not everyone was probably in here when I read these. But I did want to just note a few of these bullet points that were raised as far as identifying if you're a sensitive striver. And let's see, let me read one of these. This one was really, when I read, you struggled to turn off your mind because it's constantly filled with thoughts. If you can relate to that, I'm sure you can as an HSP. This is where I have tried to really tap into my loving kindness practice and get out of my head and into my heart and focus on that energy of giving love to myself and then turning that energy I've cultivated in that moment and then spreading love to others, whether it's a community, a person, a system, government officials, relatives, our guides on the other side, whatever it might be. And sinking into the heart has been a huge shift for me in turning off a lot of that constant thoughts and thinking that the thinking needs to happen to get to where you want to go. I've just found more support by releasing and letting go and then allowing things to kind of show up as they will, and then not having expectations and giving myself a lot of grace when maybe I try something that didn't totally work out or I had different expectations and those weren't met, and just softening myself and going into that heart center to really manage those thoughts that can be really overwhelming. I relate to this one. You feel anxious when you're caught off guard or know you're being watched. I can't stand working and having someone over my shoulder. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that. As a highly sensitive person, obviously we're picking up and sensing our environment subconsciously and consciously. And when those eyes are just on us, it's like that pressure to perform, to do it to the best of our ability. It's like a distraction. It's noise. It's really difficult to ground when I'm being watched. And so that's something too, where I've pretty much set up my life to have positions where someone isn't watching me. That isn't part of what I do. But for instance, if I'm cooking in the kitchen and my partner's just watching me do my every move, it makes me anxious. It really kind of throws me into a different emotional state. And so with that information, I know that I can shoo him out of the kitchen and let him know that I would prefer to just do my work without being watched. So having those boundaries and speaking up for your needs are really important as HSPs. And then you hold yourself to high standards. I don't know where this came from in terms of my development, whether that was coming from my trait as a child, or if I saw others, or if it was my attachment style to my parents, or I'm not sure exactly where that came from, but I remember so often people would tell me how self-critical I was. And that was because I was motivated to strive and achieve these high standards. And it was in everything. It wasn't just in one area. And so you can imagine as an HSP how burnt out you would feel when you're constantly trying to do everything to the level of success and perfectionist level in all that you do, and how that just isn't sustainable. And so now I have high standards of myself, but I also give myself a lot of grace. So I'm able to go back and forth from, okay, I'd like to see myself here, but often it's, get it done instead of it being done perfectly, is really my go-to. You try to get things right and judge yourself harshly if you make mistakes. I think that is my younger self. I remember when I was a nanny for a couple of chiropractors. This was like 2010. So this was like a dozen years ago. And I had to prove my value. It was really an odd start to a job where I had a set rate that I charged for my services, and they had a different idea about that. And so I had to actually spend, I think, the first 6 weeks being judged by them if they would allow for me to be at the rate that I had wanted to be at from the very start. And so I got into this thought pattern of everything I had to do it right because I knew I was being evaluated. And my pay would be reflected based on their judgment of how well I was doing my job. And I wasn't even a nanny. I was pretty much their everything. I only worked there for 3 days a week, but one of my days was a 14-hour shift. And I would have the kids from the very beginning of the day all the way through their bedtime, and I would make them a meal. And I just remember getting to that point where I would have that evaluation, and from the parents of these kids where I was a nanny, and their expectations were exceeded. They were like, of course, we will pay you what you ask because of your performance. But where that kind of kicked me in the butt down the road in that relationship is now I needed to perform at that peak level. And if I went backwards, then they were judging me as if I weren't doing my job. And that really hurt me. And I think about all those high achievers that are highly sensitive, who are just doing this intense amount of labor to prove themselves and their worth. And then when they kind of slow down or pull back, we're judged by those employers or colleagues or coworkers that we're not able to do our job successfully because we have adjusted to the fact that if we continued at that level, we would burn out. And one of the comments that I still run in my head all the time, I remember I would make the same meal for them every single Monday, and it was super boring. And when I was sitting there at the stove trying to make the meal, sometimes I would organize the spice cabinet because obviously when you cook, you want to be able to grab for things and know where they're at. And later down the road, when I didn't do that often enough, I was called out on it. And I just couldn't believe that that was something that they would assume was part of my job. I did it out of boredom, not so much out of this is my job title and this is what I need to do at my job. So also being really self-aware about when you are overachieving, you're setting the bar for how others perceive your work performance. And so when you get to that point where you can't maintain that, they're going to shift their perspective of what you're capable of. And that can really be harmful for your self-esteem, your self-worth. And as a highly sensitive person, we're going to deeply process that. And ultimately, that relationship with that family didn't last long much after that, because they wanted me to shift the days that I worked for them. And at the time, I was teaching an evening course on photography. And so it kind of butted up against, and I didn't have the transition time to even have dinner, and ended up not continuing with that family. But it just is something that I think about often in this process of reframing my past and looking at my past through the HSP lens, now that I know I'm a highly sensitive person. And those decisions or experiences that were, still leaving a negative taste in my mouth or a negative experience, I'm now able to look at those and think, wow, I was really being motivated by this part of myself that didn't feel enough, that I wasn't worth this level of money or this job title or this position. And now I've just softened a lot of that, and I can give myself a lot of grace. I have the flexibility to work for myself, so I'm not really up against a manager or a boss, but I still have to engage with the outside world in the different jobs that I do. So there's a level of professionalism that has really been shaped around my boundaries and my experience, being a photographer and letting people know how to show up for photos, what's important in photos, how to dress in photos, what energy is required to do photos. All of that comes from life experience. And as an HSP, I'm able to take that detailed observation and be a better photographer to the public, because I have that self-awareness and knowledge to give them a better experience, so I have a better experience in the overall production of making a photograph. And that is something that I had thought about before I even was aware that I was an HSP. And that's why I valued myself as a photographer, someone who was self-compassionate and led people in a very kind way to produce art, essentially, and to show up with the right mindset. So I wasn't working with adults who were being really harsh or negative to their children because their children didn't want to cooperate. They didn't want to be smiling in a photo. And I think approaching things as an HSP and bringing my sensitivity into the work that I do just gives me more value. Whereas before, I would let the external world decide my value for me. So it's just a huge shift in perspective when you can really allow your authentic trait to show up in all the work that you do. So, yeah, I really love this term, sensitive striver. Like I said, I had not heard of this term before. And I just thought this would be a great Clubhouse room to have a discussion and see if this resonated with other HSPs. I do know personally a lot of HSP sensitive strivers. And I started recently putting a lot of what I call all my hats down on an Excel sheet. And I'm thinking that I may even share that template when if there's enough interest. So if that's something that you're in the process of kind of creating for yourself, really recognizing all the things that you do and getting a bird's eye view of it is so valuable, because one, you can recognize that being hard on yourself is not going to work. And you can, too, see all that you do and really recognize that, you're doing a lot, and it's a lot to manage, and it's a lot to have a lot of different passions and a lot of different areas that you want to grow and improve in your life. And so having a template, and then I just have different containers and different expandable templates that allow me to really feel organized and grounded so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I go to sit down and work on a certain area of what I do. So if that's something that interests you, if you're kind of a person that wants something tangible or a worksheet that feels like you can reference to it and you can use it as like a working document, let me know. You can say something in the comments or send me a message by clicking on the airplane. I won't be able to look at the message until after the room is over. I'm not very good at toggling and holding space at the same time. But let me just read these comments here really quick in the chat. Okay, so Dorinda says, I don't like being watched while working either. It makes me nervous and more prone to making mistakes. I have to agree with you there. And it's funny because just that feeling of someone watching us changes our rhythm and our flow with our work. And I think because we're picking up so much from all of those senses at once, that's why it's really prevalent for HSPs. Raj Kumar says, I'm too honest where I take guilt from others' mistakes if I'm involved either directly or indirectly. Yes. I want to say guilt is huge. I feel so much guilt. It's dictated how much I charge for things, how much empathy I give other people, and then take on and shoulder that responsibility that I would normally expect them to have. And that guilt factor does come into play quite a bit. Hyla says, everything you're saying is hitting close to home. Lena or Lane, if I'm not pronouncing your name, I apologize. Lena says, I really want to let go of myself, getting so much stress by myself. I have to keep moving, productive. Is there any phone app for HSP? I'm not sure what phone app means. I'd like to know more about that question. And Teria says, oh, yes, I can function properly when I know I'm being watched, and I can always tell. I can't function. Sorry, I misspoke. I can't function properly when I know I'm being watched. I have to agree with you there. And that comes with anything, just like anyone following me around. I remember I would go into a store and I would be trying to find something, and the person I'm with is just like on my heels following me around. And it's like, can't you just go look somewhere else while I try to focus on finding what I need? So I think that is very much an HSP thing. And it comes to just our nervous system is constantly processing, that energy that's hovering near us. And it takes us away from that focus that we would like to have in that moment with the work that is at hand. So really great comments. Thanks so much for writing in the chat. Sorry, it takes me a minute to get over there to read everything. So I appreciate your comments, and for everyone just here listening and tuning in the audience. And for anyone that comes to this room as a replay, these are always available as replays. Also, I do put these conversations on YouTube so you can listen to them like a podcast. So if that's something that you just want to tune into without looking at a screen and being present on the Clubhouse app, that is available as well. So if anyone else would like to come to stage and share anything about this topic or your HSP experience as a high achiever and what that looks like for you, or if that's something that you were in your younger days and have a different experience in your wisdom as a more mature person, a more mature HSP, you're welcome to come up here on stage. But if not, we can go ahead and close the room here at an hour. We typically go for 90 minutes, but I have a very full day with a lot of different things in it that I'm really excited about. And I'm just really happy to have this conversation for everyone to tune in and be here and take part in whatever level you're able to participate. So thanks so much for being here. And I would just go ahead and mute myself here if anyone would like to pop up on stage before we close the room. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Julie. How are you? I'm Rajkumar and I'm from South India. Apologies if I'm not making proper English contonation means because I'm first generation English speaker. But basically, I I'm trying to say that being hypersensitive was my born blessing. I struggle a lot. I try to get along with people. I'm a misfit. I'm 29 and yet I couldn't make solid right friendship because they saw me as an highly emotional sensitive person where I often get serious for too little stuff. Sometimes I even wonder why I'm reacting for so petty things, even though it doesn't make sense back in the days. But over the point when I allowed myself for the time and space to settle in, to sink in the information, I was able to understand that I am built differently. And it is not a flaw, it is my own specific nature, which for which I couldn't resonate with the the masses. They see certain stuff at shallow level, where most likely I initially often get to the intricate parts itself. It just takes even seconds for me to understand the cues behind it. Sometimes I overboard, sometimes I overthink, sometimes I overexhaust or overthrust myself, and it has been became an innate nature of myself where I couldn't even control it or couldn't manage it. Sometimes when I try to cook, if I see a lot of utensils next to me, means I feel that panic. I just try to keep my space very clean and organized. I don't like messy stuff at all because that will often get to my nerves. So to compensate my discomfort, I used to make myself or even project myself on a perfectionist person. Exactly, a perfectionist. Sometimes if I don't fit with the expectation means I immediately feel that rejection. So being hard on myself was something I was trying to overcome, but right now I chose a different path given my nature, because since I really feel lonely where I need a solid one person where I could feel myself, and it didn't happen throughout my life given my thinking abilities and my own specific nature. I feel hopeless and helpless. It is not I'm being too hard on myself. I'm speaking the obvious reality where I need to be seen as well. I don't need to be treated as some sort of a person who suffers from mental disorder. Every time somebody asks me, why are you behaving abnormally? Do you suffer from borderline personality disorder or do you have any sort of obsessions? I do have compulsions and obsessions, but that doesn't translate to any sort of mental disorder. But the way I have been conditioned, right from my teachers, my parents, and even my friends, they say me that I exhibit low confidence or low self-esteem. But naturally, my body suffers from imbalance where it doesn't have the physical strength to exhibit confidence because it is suffering from lot of stress. But I came to know on my own knowledge it only because the way they kept on giving me the suggestions and opinions and prejudices that gave me further more stress. I try to isolate from those people because they are not even honest with me at all. I just give up my time. I run around them. I try to woo them. I try to make them comfortable by knowing their choices, and I surprise them a lot. But I feel invalidated, and I never felt that my actions are reciprocated. At least they were. I couldn't even feel myself when I was around them. I could feel only people external to me. But over the point, when I was suffering to dark times, the deadliest points of my life, when I thought about my life, I wasn't there. Only people's choices were there. And due to my nature, I was throughout vulnerable since my birth, and that became an issue for me because I was entirely overexposed. I don't know how much information which I took or take even day to day basis. A loud horn, a loud sound definitely puts me off. I try to maintain inner peace by shutting people. I don't make eye contacts easily. I definitely have a lot of trust issues. It is not that I'm willing to, I'm not denying to be in their presence, but sometimes I need help. It could relate to some sort of something in the past, but I'm not that kind of person. But the way people treat me right from their first impressions doesn't make me feel good. I don't. I was kept on covering to the point I gave up my actual individuality, where I entirely altered into a different personality. But when I chose an option that choice that, let it be. I'll stay the. I'll stay. I'll remain the same. I'll chose what I was given with. So I forgot whatever I took. I try to be the same as him right now because I'm stammering with the right words. My minds run faster where I couldn't pick right words. It's not about me being in different room. That doesn't matter. That's not the actual key. Miscommunication, misinterpretation is really problematic. I think one, but I say one, and people cannot even correlate with myself. So these are the traits which I often face in my day-to-day life. When it comes to career, that becomes a black mark for me because I need to understand the requirements clear. I cannot run behind money. I just need a simple peace and subtle life. But given my characteristics and my ambience and surroundings, I have to run for money. So I'm trying to shuffle things. I'm trying to eliminate the noise, the unnecessary, where I don't follow people these days. I just try to find my own self, at least my own frequency. I need to see myself for the most of the time. If I cannot speak for myself, then who will speak for me? So these are the things which I really, really find it as a blessing, not a curse. It is no longer a weakness. It is no longer a flaw. It's just a limitation. So I am blessed with advanced or excessive nervous system where it thinks that everything is a threat for me. So I need to keep myself defensive. But when I see physically challenged or visually challenged people, I simply lower my guards. I drop my defenses because I feel that they need help. They are stuck. At least I should try to help them. For even that small instances, that small span of time, I could feel myself totally. But when I introspected, I just came up with the idea called if I replaced they, the word they, instead of they, when I put myself into that, I was able to understand that I actually need help. I need somebody to lift me, at least make me feel good. I am stuck. Why can't you guys just sit back for a while and listen to what I'm trying to say? Why do we even shut me off when I'm initially even speaking? Why don't you guys have so much impatience yet blame me that I am the one who is suffering from impatience? I am emotionally stable, but you are the ones who are making me emotionally unstable through your words, through your presence. Despite you don't have the courtesy to understand my own nature. I'm not exactly pointing the people here. I'm pointing indirectly to my circle because I'm speaking out of my incompetence. I have the guts, but I have the tendency not to hurt people as well. But over the point, when I get overboard, I have only option to yell and shout. And finding the right person, something a similar match of my own, is really challenging. And I just need one person where I I I could make things happening. But if that's the case, at least part of myself thinks that maybe it is time to upgrade. So I'm in a process where I'm trying to find a stabilized, a systematic, civilized approach where my condition cannot be seen as a threat, or at least a discomfort. So I am being myself, I am being more authentic with myself first, let alone whatever I express, whatever I project, you guys decide. You guys decide, and you make the decision maker, because I can only project, and apart from that I don't have control at all. So when I came to find a truce with that, a part of myself start to remain calm, because there is no need for me to run behind people and convince that, okay, this is what I'm going through, please understand me. So I just trained myself in such a way that people have their own load capacities and their cognitive abilities. If I can make them see myself, definitely at some point they might even start to think about me. And that will happen in a candid manner, not in the most exposed or a straightforward attitude. So I'm just being brutally candid and honest, and I'm simply wide open, where I'm just trying to say this is no longer a condition, it is a blessing for me. And with that, I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was really processing what you were sharing, and the whole time I was like, you're really describing the HSP experience from so many different levels and so many different points of experience. So, um, I can relate to, I can understand a lot of the different things that you're processing, and just that inner experience, that journey that we're on, that we don't necessarily get to show with the outside world because the culture and society is not set up to go at our pace and to give us space and time to really explore all of that inner wisdom as a highly sensitive person. So I just want to commend you for your bravery to share your story and your experience. And perhaps someone listening may hear their own experience differently now based on what you've shared. So thank you for doing that. And I just want to say that the more you get to know yourself, the deeper understanding you have of yourself, the greater impact you're going to have in the world, because you're operating from a space that is authentic to you. And that's what we need in the world, is people being their unique self, not being what society or culture expects of us. So it is a creative journey. It is a brave journey. It is not easy. But that's another reason why I created this HSP community, so that we could come together and share our experience and perhaps go through some of those harder times together, and also offer each other reminders that there is support available to us. There are HSP knowledgeable therapists, and there are people that we can lean on in times of need, and that it is important to be mindful of our mental, emotional, and physical health and reflect on that often, because we are more sensitive to our environment, and we are going to run low. We're going to tap out, burnout, whatever it might be, sooner than a non HSP. So, those are things that we really need to cultivate, that awareness within ourselves to live successfully and thrive as a highly sensitive person. So that is a continual process. It is a continual journey, and showing up in spaces like this that honor your trait, that value your sensitivity, that honor your voice are really important. So you're doing the things to take care of yourself and your level of depth and sensitivity. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you. And before we go here, I see Carla has hopped up. What would you like to share, Carla?
Hi, thank you for this space. And Raj Kumar, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Thank you for your transparency. I just wanted to mention, it took a little bit for me to decide to do this, but it's still a journey for me. But I'd just like to share that probably within the last 5 years here now, been really going on a path of practicing introspection of just understanding myself truthfully, who I am, understanding my emotions, my mental processes, and how is it that I've gotten here, right? I will share that by going through that, I was able to go all the way back to my childhood. And within that childhood path, I could say my being the oldest of, 6 siblings. My mom always um, looked to me to, I would say, because she's single mom, but even though my dad was there are some other issues with that, but I won't get into that point. But it was almost like I was the second parent in a way, right? And so starting out very early, I'm just going to share this little aspect. Um, I recall when she was getting me prepared to go, to grade school here. And I remember her telling me to write out my name, my alphabet. And so I was doing that. And so I would write it out. I think I did it like 20 times or something like that, 20 or 25 times. And I'll take it to her. And she said, no, go back and do it again. Mind you, this went on, I did it probably about 5 or 6, 7 times. And I just couldn't understand, why am I having to do it over? Because it looked as if it was perfect to me, at least in my eyes, right? And then I just kept doing what she's saying, just kept doing what she was saying. But I bring that up to say that thought process and the things that were going through my head as to making up to why she was doing this, because she never gave me an explanation. It caused me to carry on this like perfectionist attitude, right? The fact that everything has to be perfect, has to be lined up. You didn't do this right, it needs to go in this direction. Or the fact that sometimes it did cause me with my siblings as they got older, um, I was that go-to person. Or they would make fun of me. You're four eyes. You read too much. You're so interested in science, so on and so forth. Things that I was in love with and very passionate about. But because I didn't want to, be that person that kind of shined more than them, then I noticed that I kind of just kind of sheltered myself and, only did enough, to kind of get by. Right. Well, fast forward into adulthood, realizing that I've been carrying this thing all throughout my life, right? And then sometimes when it comes to like educational endeavors or achieving certain things or just being successful, period, in whatever aspect of my life, that I would just sit there and just be like, okay, should I do this? Or I don't want to stand out, or maybe I should not, or it doesn't really matter type aspect, right? And then the fact of when it comes to like leadership, I don't like that, for someone to say that you're a good leader. I kind of just, go with the flow because we're all in it together. And I'm making sure that everyone is taking part in that, but everyone sees me as that direct leader. But I just can't come to grips with the term itself. So within this last 5 years that I've been actually doing this is through the process of my having going back to grad school, right? It took a while, but I've gotten there. And within that last 5 years or so, um, I have, graduated with my master's of science in nursing. I'm RN, but got my master's of science in nursing, became an advanced practice registered nurse. I also became a certified medical examiner to do DOT physicals, for commercial truck drivers. I am also a sexual assault nurse examiner trained, just recently got that. And currently a doctor of nursing practice. My actual graduation is May 8th, right? And then I'm currently in another program that's looking at wound ostomy practices. And then my goal is to become a certified wound ostomy nurse, advanced practice, right? So I bring all this up because all these years that I've been doing this, oh my God, you're doing so much, right? Why are you doing this? What are you trying to prove? But I have to look at the fact that there are a lot of passions that I have. Why am I always putting these things on the back burner to appease other people or to not appease other people or to make them feel some type of way when truthfully I feel a lot of times is really not having anything to do with me, but maybe they see something in me that triggers them, and I'm taking on that energy and making it my own. And Carla, see, Gully, you have got to stop doing that, right? Because then it pushes me behind. So I've just been practicing the fact that, well, what is it that you want, Carla, right? Starting out with that introspection. Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself, right? Just going all the way back so that I get real deep in trying to figure out me, who I am. What am I most passionate about? Looking at the people that I would choose to hang around or not hang around, or the fact that to even get, when it comes to spirituality, um, just here in the last few years and by joining this group, just to even put certain terms to some of the things that I've been going through, because this goes all the way back from childhood where I could sense some things and see things, but never have trying to understand or figure these things out. Well, what does that mean? Or why do I feel this way? And I used to ask my grandma, well, why am I feeling this way? No one else seems to, or I can't really find anyone to really relate to what I'm actually going through. And then taking on that energy and thinking that something's truthfully wrong with me, right? And not sharing it with other people because not really knowing how they're going to take it, right? People telling me you're psychic and all kind of stuff like that, and I'm like, whoa, 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 okay, getting a little out of hand. And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but it's not often that I come up and I speak. So I guess I'm just real free at this point to just share. And I'm hoping that it is resonating with someone and maybe they could understand or probably take on a different perspective when it comes to introspection for themselves. So most importantly, through that process, I'm not as fearful, but I am more conscious of myself and my thoughts. Even when it comes to dealing with my patients, patients will see me or just my presence. They'll tell me, I feel so safe with you being here. I don't know what it is, uh, but I feel safe, with you taking care of me. Or the fact that they may have had a different perspective with other staff, but when I came in and I start working with them, and they say, you've changed my whole outlook just by being here, or just the words that you shared with me. So just taking on those things and just, understanding that even through the passions and stuff, it is my ultimate goal to serve others, right? I've always desired to do that. But sometimes I will say that I do take on too much sometimes. And I've learned to kind of just, take out time for myself, practice self care, right? So that I can, rejuvenate myself, right? Because it can become so draining. I am that go to person that even in my family people come to. It makes it so bad sometimes because I'm like the first grandchild and everybody else falls under me. I'm 43, by the way, but everybody else falls under me, all the way down to the great, great, great grands, right? And so family does tend to look up to me. And by my having obtained this terminal degree, they're very excited, right? There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, but I have to tell them it's never been a competition. Um, I've never been in competition with other people, but maybe more or less competition with being a better version of myself, right? And I think that's the gist of the things as to where I am now at the space in my life, and to not look down on myself for having made those achievements. It's nothing wrong with that, right? And even with my siblings and stuff, some of them are taking necessary steps now because they've seen me grow. Some of them have expressed how they used to say, yeah, you used to be doing all this. And I used to wonder why I hadn't taken that on instead of just joining you versus, being upset because you were choosing to do that. So anyways, I don't want to keep rambling, but I just wanted to share that, and thank you for this space.
Thank you so much, Carla. Again, just that inner processing that you're sharing. I really resonated with so many points that you shared, and just that internal awareness and that growth and how that shows up in connection with other people. Like you mentioned, patients relating and connecting with you differently, because you have that level of introspection is really key. And I think because we have the ability as highly sensitive people to tune in to that internal stimuli and pay attention and ask questions and go deep, that gives us this superpower to connect with ourselves in a way that non-HSPs are not practicing. And it gives us value in our relationships in the way we connect, because we bring that introspection into that connection. And I really loved how you kind of just showed this evolution of your journey and your life experience, from being a small child to where you're at now, and your level of growth and your level of learning. And I think that again comes back to having this innate biological trait that just sits us down and gives us this internal experience that not everyone is experiencing. And I wanted to mention, if you pull to refresh, so if you put your finger on the screen and just pull down, I've posted a new link. I just watched this video this morning, and it was really interesting because it got me thinking again about how we compare ourselves, and how that is really a painful act to compare ourselves, especially us high achievers who have a lot of interests and want to do a lot of things, and we're stretching our time and attention between so many things. And what you said that I really want to hit on, Carla, about being in competition with yourself. I say that all the time because I am not motivated to be or to strive to be like others. I just see who I am in this space and time, in this present moment. And I ask myself those questions. Am I comfortable? Do I feel good? Am I happy? Am I aligned with my values? And then I'm taking that inner journey and I'm giving it space and time to sit with those thoughts and ideas, and then pivot or make changes or let things go. And that self-awareness is in its own practice and a process and a journey. And what I love about this video is, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Gabor Mate. I'm probably not saying his name correctly, but he does so much beautiful work on trauma and healing trauma. He has a documentary out there that if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But his work and just listening to everything he says just softens me. And his big message is focus more of your time inward than outward. And through that journey and that process, you'll come home to yourself, and you'll live your life through that authentic experience instead of making yourself meet other people's expectations or cultural expectations or society expectations. So that internal journey is so valuable and so important to be, I think, a grounded, authentic, valuable person. And then when you layer that with being an HSP, we have the ability and the depth to go into that process more frequently and practice that. And then through that process, we're able to show up in the world differently, and show up in relationships differently. And that looks like something more empathetic, more sensitive, more compassionate than maybe people who haven't taken the time to go inward and reflect on who they are and what they're bringing into the world, um, and how they show up in those connections with the outside world. So it's all valid and important. And I think for anyone that's on a growth and learning journey, spending time inward is part of that natural process of understanding ourselves so that we can bring understanding to others. Because if you don't know yourself, you're constantly missing the mark of what you can bring to other people because you're too influenced by outside sources, which is very common for HSPs. But when we are more knowledgeable and self-aware about who we are and what we bring, that presence, that energy is felt and seen by others, even though they may only be picking up on it subconsciously. So that is a gift, and that is our gift, I think, in the world as highly sensitive people. So I really appreciate everything that you shared, Carla, and thanks for being up here on stage and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for the space.
So with that,
Julie,
go ahead.
yes, I really want to share a few techniques and thoughts to think about. This time I'm going to speak my mind. So basically, I I wanted to ask few questions, and that would revolve around the four words: priority, convenience, mirroring, and restfulness. So when I try to explain these four words, definitely we will find a technique. So when I'm trying to say the word mirroring means it's basically whether I'm reflecting internally or whether am I reflecting the external world. Say if I smile at somebody means they'll smile at me back. That's how mirroring works. So if I try to mirror what is really happening inside by bringing it to the outside world, just by expressing it, not to limit anymore, definitely we'll find patterns to manage these things. So how I'm able to achieve this thing is to ask myself a simple question is that what every situation has to do with me. If I feel that I'm connected with everything, does everything has a matter of or held or a part of myself in that, or am I really thinking in such way? So when I able to ask questions ask such question in certain conditions or stimulations, I was able to detach myself. So within an instant, I made myself noise free because those situations has never ever expected me to be there. So I was the one who thought that I should be there. First of all, I should pick my battles. I should know my own fights. If I don't know that, I'll be there all over the place. And being hypersensitive is such a trait. I'm all over the place. So I started to reduce my scope of operations, my modus of operandi. Why I did is that I feel too exhausted. I cannot focus on everything. So multitasking is something luxury which I can't even afford. So that is why I started thinking about convenience. Basically, my body requires comfort, but the way I keep on pushing myself in such a way that I'm no longer in fight with anybody. I'm just trying to bring the best of out of myself. So I was running all around, but I don't know when to sit back or when to quit. My body really ached for it. A part of myself wants rest. A part of myself wants works to be done. So basically, I consider the words called natural selection and choices. Natural selection is something which I don't have control because it's involuntary and it has to do with subconscious. But choices, it is voluntary. It is conscious will. That is where I was able to make a difference. That no matter how far uh, my experiences, no matter my experiences tried to train me, I can choose whether I can take it or leave it. So I chose to sit back at least for a while, just to understand my own fights. If I do that, at least I can understand my scope and where to work with. That has to do with convenience, rest, and most likely choosing the right priority. So if I was able to do that, maybe I could feel that my body is feeling so much of new life, health, and feeling fit. And Carla, you just said that maybe you're not so beautiful, but trust me, but over the point, if you give yourself time, you might pick new aspects, new patterns to make yourself more young, vibrant, glossy, and even more confident, and it will happen effortlessly and spontaneous. With that, I'm done speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. You brought up a lot of great points. And again, I just thank you so much for being in the space today and sharing your story. And I think, again, just listening to both Raj Kumar and Carla in your thought process and having the space to share your thought process has really helped people maybe understand highly sensitive people and what we're up against and how we think about things and what is needed for our success and for our ability to thrive in the world. So I just want to say thank you. I honor you as HSPs and as courageous, sensitive people who are here in the world speaking up and sharing your perspective. It's valued and needed. So thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and close the room today. I really appreciate this conversation. Thanks for sticking around as a listener or listening in as a replay. I am hosting rooms here in the HSP Club on Thursdays typically, but with my work schedule through mid-May, it's a little bit all over the place. So please check the HSP Club for the upcoming rooms. I do have some rooms scheduled out through May. And if you have a topic that you're really passionate about and you want to see us talk about it in the HSP Club, don't be shy. You can add it in the chat. You can send me a message here through Clubhouse. I'd love to hear what's important to you and what you would like to do a deep dive on. I have a lot of different ideas that I would like to also share in terms of different rooms for this club. And a lot more will be coming mid-May and beyond, as I will not be in my substitute teaching schedule. So thanks again for being here. Thanks for being yourself. I hope that this HSP community has given you a little validation and self-acceptance along your journey. And anytime you need some of that, make sure that you come back and connect with other HSPs. That is part of how we survive and thrive as sensitive people, where the world is not designed for us. So we have to be really proactive about taking care of ourselves, self-care, connecting in a community with other HSPs, and valuing who we are authentically and powerfully. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Great to see some familiar faces in the audience. We'll see you next time. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Bye-bye.